Good morning. Welcome to the Red Barn Steakhouse, the Montrose Uray and San Miguel Farm Bureau, the Drug Testing Incorporated Trading Post right here on AM 580 KUBC. And again, as always, our national anthem is brought to us today by Simmons Lock and Key right here in Montrose. Remember, anything to do with residential or commercial locksmithing, give Carl Smith a call at 209-4325. Again, that's 209-4325 at Simmons Lock and Key right here in Montrose. Carl's a great man, and he does great work, and he stands by it. That's, in this country today, we need people doing great work and that will stand by it. Good, honest men and women who are doing the right things. Carl Smith over there at Simmons Lock and Key is one of them. 209-4325, and Carl wants to remind us, as always, to make that opportunity to thank someone who has served this country. Take that step forward and just say thank you. Just show your appreciation for somebody who has or somebody who is serving this country. Thank you. Today we have Mr. David Justice. Thanks for joining us, David.
It's always a pleasure, Jim.
Was it a slickery drive today?
It was. Don't do it.
You don't have to.
Do not be traveling. Do not be going to Gunnison or anywhere today.
Just settle down.
It's pretty slick.
Okay.
Very, very slick.
Well, thank you for making that trek over here.
Well, this is my investment. This is my investment into what's coming.
Well, you've got a lot of people who are listening to you every Thursday, and thanks for making that investment.
Well, they're listening to us. This wouldn't happen without you providing the forum. So,
well, we're in it. We're trying to do good work here.
We're going to do good work here. There is no try.
I like it.
Do or do not. We're here to do.
I was telling you earlier that this weekend I was down in the mouth. I was just feeling overwhelmed with all this stuff, and I start listening to people that have started to do things, that have started to do things and get out of their comfort zone that they haven't done before, to fight back and to stand up. And I'm going, hey, wait a minute, there's no time for you to be down. You've got to keep going.
The opportunity is presenting itself, and we have to be prepared.
That's right.
So what some people might look at as calamity, we need to look at as opportunity. And we need to. You're going through the depression or the low point. It just says that you're actually getting it and letting it in. And we need to let it in and work through that to get on the other side so that we get determined about actually doing something positive to be the difference that we want to see in the world.
Well, you've lined us up with a guest today that I am really looking forward to listening to, Robert Allen with Project Appleseed. Can you kind of introduce Robert and tell us what's going on?
I would consider Robert a friend. He lives near Gunnison, as I do, and he is a constitutionalist. He's a historian. He's someone that's very interested in the history and the details of what actually happened during to prompt the Revolutionary War. He's involved in a project called Appleseed Project, and I'm going to let Robert tell us a little bit more about it. But just a quick intro, they're teaching people to become proficient with their firearms. They're teaching people about safety and how to hit the target. And so, Robert, why don't you go into a little more depth about exactly what Project Appleseed is?
Hello, Robert. You still with us?
Yes, sir. I'm with you.
Okay. Robert, what we'd like, first of all, thanks for joining us here. And could you kind of go into, tell us about Project Appleseed and what you're trying to accomplish?
Project Appleseed is a history of firearms teaching organization. What we teach is the first day of the American Revolution, which we know is Lexington and Concord. We have Appleseed shoots all over the country, generally in the warmer months, but we also have some in the winter months. They usually run Saturdays and Sundays, And you can sign up online at projectappleseed.org for one of these shoots. We welcome everyone from old men and women all the way down to children 7 and 8 years old. But going into the first day of the American Revolution, the struggle that led to the freedoms that we enjoy today, we call it the 3 strikes of the match in Appleseed. Give you some background here. In Boston, Paul Revere and his associates had been organizing for about 10 years leading up to 1775 and resisting what was becoming more and more controlling British tyranny. They formed what they called the Committees of Safety and Correspondence.
Robert, what year are we in now? What year?
1765 through 1775.
Okay, so this was the decade before the Declaration of Independence.
That's right.
Okay.
And this led up to the Declaration of Independence signing. What the 3 strikes of the match were was the British had decided to disarm the American colonies, with Boston and Massachusetts colony being right at the top of the list because they were the biggest troublemakers. And they did a powder for a arms raid on the Boston Powder Magazine, which was about 6 miles outside of Boston. This contained the colonial militia's arms stores. Well, that raid was successful. General Gage and his troops managed to capture about 250 barrels of black powder and all the lead shot and arms that were in that arsenal. Well, this enraged the colonists, and they descended on Boston in a show of force of about 30,000 armed men, but nobody fired a shot. Everybody went home that day. Well, Revere and his riders, and there were very many of them, they had spies within the British hierarchy, and so they got a system going where they knew what the British were going to do next. Well, the British decided to strike at another colonial powder magazine up the coast of New England, and that one failed. Then they did it again up to what we now know as Maine. That one also failed. Well, Revere and his people were hearing about the raid on Concord, which was quite a distance inland from Boston, about 20 miles. That, if you got, in the days of horses and men on foot, this was a long day's march from Boston in what we would call Indian country. Well, as I said, Paul Revere and his people knew what was going to happen. In the 6 months leading up to this, all these villages in Boston Colony or Massachusetts Colony had been training and reviving their militias. And so they practiced weekly, many of them with target shooting, fieldcraft, military tactics. They actually raised up some ingenious military commanders that had never had any experience. So by the time of Lexington, they were ready to go. Well, on April the 19th, 1775, General Gage ordered his troops out of Boston, and they arrived in Lexington, Massachusetts, the first crack of day. And that's where we know that the shot heard round the world was fired.
Hey, Robert, let's talk about that shot for a second. Is it unreasonable to conclude that the reason that shot was fired was because the British were coming to get their guns?
That's exactly right, David.
So Americans were being threatened with gun control at the beginning of the American Revolution.
That's correct.
Would you say that the gun control was the cause and the reason for the American Revolution?
One of the main reasons, David.
All right, let's go before the gun control. Obviously, the British feared armed Americans.
That's right.
What was it? And I don't want to lead you, but why were they wanting to disarm the people? What was it about that moment in time that the people were, that Britain actually became fearful of the people being armed?
In 1765, David, King George III, the Parliament, imposed the Stamp Act on the colonies, which was a 1-cent tax on every piece of paper, contract that was signed, whether you were getting married or a bill of sale or what have you. Okay, that led to the Boston riots in part. Then the British started going after freedom of the press, freedom of speech, freedom of religion. And these things were building and building, led to the Boston riots, as I said. And finally, one of the later things that happened was the Boston Tea Party, which was caused by the British imposing a law on the colonists that they could only buy British tea and none other. And that caused the colonists to disguise themselves as Indians and go onto the king's ships and unload the cargo into the Boston Bay. And that led to the Boston Port Bill, which closed the ports of Boston, which, in the case of a colony that depends on fishing a lot, that meant they were going to be starving.
So they threw the tea in the harbor, it's my understanding, and see if you can expound on this a little bit, to prevent a precedent or to as a point of principle. It was a precedent they didn't want to be set.
That's right. They've been living 150 years under the British Crown, and they thought of themselves as British, but they were having the rights of the British citizens they had enjoyed for all that time taken away from them. And they tried everything they could to negotiate with the British Crown. Men like John Hancock, Ben Franklin, Samuel Adams, and many others had been talking to the British ministry and Crown, trying to find a way around this, and very patiently trying to negotiate a settlement, and they just couldn't get it done. Part of this stems clear back to the French and Indian Wars. The British had nearly gone broke trying to fight the French and Indians for the control of North America, and the King's Ministry and Parliament thought this would be the colonists should help pay for this, and the King didn't want to bring his troops home from North America because that would be a big impact on England, and so they decided to maintain a standing army in North America, which was one of the objections that the colonists raised time and again. And so this Stamp Act and many other taxes that came up later were part of the reason to maintain this British force in America, a large army. And this is how we get the Third Amendment to the Constitution, that there shall not be a standing army in the Americas. So that's how the Third Amendment came to be. And from the American Revolution, this is where we got the first 10 amendments. If you haven't read them, you need to.
Robert, could you explain what a standing army is?
Well, a standing army is an army representing the government in power that, in the case of the Boston citizenry, they actually had to put them up in their homes. They had to buy room and board for British troops. And, of course, they were rigidly controlled by this military police force.
So it's fair to say an occupying army?
Yeah, it was an occupying army, and this caused the arms confiscation of people of Boston were ordered to turn in all their muskets, their powder, their shot. They couldn't keep anything in the way of arms, so they were disarmed. The people of Boston lost their right to arms.
So it's amazing, and I'm intrigued always by history, and we can learn so much from the circumstances surrounding the shot heard around the world. That was the people standing up and saying, you've taken away everything else. You're not taking our guns. And from that point became the pushback that they then recovered their rights. So they used the weapons as the final line in the sand. But from there, they pushed back, and the rest is history, of course. And America gave birth to the Declaration of Independence, and they threw off a tyrant. Do you see parallel today, Robert? I mean, that's ridiculous. I don't want to hear you say it, though.
Oh, yeah, I see very definite parallels, David. I can't believe I'm living through this.
So now let's go to the Appleseed. So you're teaching history. And I've attended the Appleseed a few times, and it's a very good history lesson. And it can take someone that is not familiar with a firearm, and you can help them to become proficient. And so the point is,
right. What we do, we'll train you on our Army qualification target and if you can score expert on that Army qualification target, which is 210 or above, you are awarded what we call the Rifleman's Patch, and that will put you in the same ranks as those that were qualifying for the militia, and a little later, George Washington, the Continental Army, in the 1770s. So,
and you have those Appleseed shoes. Are there other places around Colorado where people can sign up?
Oh, sure. Yeah, we have, I think, 4 or 5 locations on the Front Range, and we have our Gunnison location on the western slope, and I believe we have a Grand Junction shoot coming up this spring. So you can look for those on the internet at Appleseed.org, and it's a very good website. Got lots of information. You'll really enjoy it.
Robert, one last question before we have to go. What is the overall mission? I know we were into educating about history and also about helping people become proficient with marksmanship. Tie those together for us, if you would.
Okay. Citizens without arms are not citizens. So you need to be proficient with firearms. As Patrick Henry said in those days, if you give up your arms, you are inevitably ruined. So you don't want to do that. The other thing Appleseed is doing by teaching the history is showing you what the parallels between today and back then, some 230 years ago, were. And you need to know how to deal with tyrants. When they start violating the Declaration of Independence, the principles therein, in our Constitution, the first 10 amendments, then you know they've crossed the line. So this is where you need to be, is in the Appleseed Project, and you need to go right on up from rifleman marksmanship badge right on up to full-fledged instructor, and you can start teaching other folks, your friends and neighbors and other citizens, how to become citizens so that they know the history and are proficient in defense of their home, communities, and Constitution.
Robert, thanks a lot for joining us today. I appreciate you sharing that, and I hope more people look into the Appleseed shoot and become proficient, so that the people themselves can become the deterrent against an absolute despotism rising up in America. It's on the horizon. So thanks for what you're doing, and thanks for sharing all that with us today.
Okay, man. Thanks for having me on.
You bet, Robert. One last thing. Can you tell us where we can get more information?
Right. As I said before, you get on the web on your computer and go to appleseedproject.org, and you'll find everything you need there to sign up for a shoot schedules, who the instructors are going to be, what you should bring for a shoot. It's just a full description of the whole program. These shoots happen clear across the nation. I think we had over 1,000 shoots last season. So there's lots of them in Colorado and in the surrounding states, every other state if you happen to be there. So
Thank you, Robert.
Out and join up with us and have a good time.
Thanks, Robert. And also, I happen to get on your website, and you'll learn a little bit about history as well.
That's right. You can learn a lot about history. We go into it real intensively.
Robert, thank you very much. And again, I echo what David's saying. Thanks for what you're doing.
Okay, thank you, sir.
You take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, goodbye.
Robert Allen. Again, you can go to Appleseed. I've got appleseedinfo.org, appleseedinfo.org, and you can find more information. We'll talk about that and more stuff coming up. But first, the news. You're listening to the Red Barn Steakhouse, Montrose, Uray, and San Miguel Farm Bureau, Drug Testing Incorporated, Trading Post.
Unbelievable.
Welcome back. Red Barn Steakhouse, Montrose, Uray, and San Miguel Farm Bureau. Drug Testing Incorporated, Trading Post. Our number here, 249-5800. David Justice is with us today. And, boy, David, Robert Allen, what a great call on that interview.
Yeah, history. If we know our history, if we don't know our history, we're destined to repeat it. If we do know our history, we can absolutely learn from it. And it's an inspiration, I think, to review what the Founding Fathers were up against and realize that people have been here before. As a matter of fact, our Founding Fathers were here before. They knew we were going to reach this point in history.
You know, we sometimes think we're the only people that have ever faced anything in this life. And that's a very bad mistake to make.
I'm going to say that we were born for this, Jim. And everybody that's listening to this broadcast, we were born for this. You know how I know that? Because we're here. This is the hand we've been dealt. This is the one we play. This is the life we live. And, it doesn't have to be all doom and gloom, especially if we look for the truth in this. And if we keep our eyes on the truth and pray a lot and ask to be led where we're supposed to be and develop the gifts and the talents and the abilities each one of us is given, there's a place for every one of us. And we're going to be successful. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know how it's going to come out. But we just have to trust that if we stand on the truth and in principle, that it's going to work out the way it works out, and it's an opportunity.
Let's step back for a moment. You can go to appleseedinfo.org and find out where their next shoot is. And, Dave, you've got that pulled up here.
They've got the next one coming up in Gunnison is in May 25th, and you can pre-register. And they have them all over the state. They have some in Brighton. There's good news. Brighton, Pueblo, Rama, and Bailey. And so Leadville, Grand Junction. So Crestone, these are all over the state. So just find one. Go learn some history. Go become proficient at shooting and be prepared. And I think that's the best deterrent that we could give an administration that thinks that the American people are stupid.
appleseedinfo.org. Let's take a quick call. Welcome to the Trading Post. You're live on the air.
I knew if I let this ring long enough.
How you doing, Gene?
I'm doing okay. Hey, I just wanted to call and say thanks to somebody like Bob Cox. I read his editorial, and it was wonderful. And Jim, he does do our local news, and he's great. They're bad at it. But also standing up for his beliefs in our country, isn't that local news?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
I thought that I told my boys, you're going to be so proud when you see what he wrote. And my son Pat said to tell you, the next thing they'll be asked going is like the Bob Cox cowboy assault rifle that was used in the paper.
Yeah.
and then the repeating rifles.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Once that door is squeaked open just a hair, it gets kicked open.
Yeah. And Jim, thank you for all you've done.
Well, thank you, Gene. We're all in this together, aren't we?
I know. And I don't know if you got it, but I emailed you and I told you I wish Neil was here to help you give them help.
You know, I miss all the stuff that I got to read from Neil and all the stuff that you would call. I know he didn't like to be on the radio, but I know he was in the background when you would call and you were calling together.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
He was good at what he wrote. And,
absolutely.
Boy. I got one last more thing to say, and then I'll be through.
Okay.
I haven't griped for a long time. I've got to get it all out.
Let it go.
I think Joe Biden is so two-faced to ban our guns and then tell women to get shotguns. But don't kill them inside.
Yeah, he's a piece of work, isn't he?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I wouldn't care if it was inside or outside if they were coming after my family.
Yeah, what's the deal here? I think they might be coming after me. I'm not sure. I better wait.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also, did you get the letter I sent you from the father that wrote it about the Columbine?
Yes, I did.
Okay, I haven't been able to be on the radio for a long time. I've been coming and going and everything, and I haven't got to listen to you, but I wanted to gripe.
Well, we talked about that, and please keep the info coming, will you?
Yeah, I will, because I thought that was a wonderful letter.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was.
They said, put him up on the stand like that, and then they didn't like what he said. Well, isn't that too damn bad?
Yeah, those people, they kind of sweep them under the rug, don't they?
Yeah, they do.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to tell you one last thing before we go. I miss seeing Neil's articles or his letters in the Mountain Valley News as well. I really do.
Oh, okay. Jim, and thanks. But like I said, I'm too griping now.
Okay, next time you got a gripe on, give us a call.
Okay.
All right, Gene. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Great lady there. And just a salt-of-the-earth American. I want to ask you a question. Have you ever thought about this? There's people out there that, you look at your neighbors and people you've known your whole life and people that are doing good things, but yet they grasp this idea that I don't want to call it the left or whatever that's coming down, and they live it. How can people get to that point to become puppets for this idea?
Fear. I think that if we're not motivated by love, we're motivated by fear. And right now, Americans generally are motivated by fear. We're not talking to each other. We're afraid of being labeled a crackpot. We're living in an environment where if you step outside the box, you're afraid of what people are going to think. No one wants to be wrong. No one likes to look bad. We all like to look good and be right. You stir these variables together, and you come up against a politician. A politician's not going to tell you the truth. He wants to get reelected. So he's going to speak out of both sides of his mouth. He's going to address the audience that he's speaking to one way, and then another audience the other day. The other way the next day. Truth is missing in America. We're afraid of it. We're afraid to talk about it. We're afraid to talk about what the principles of America are actually founded on because we fear the ridicule. We fear being ostracized. And until we get over that initial fear and just start saying it like it is, then we're going to continue down this road of silence to perpetuate the status quo and live inside the parameters of acceptable thinking.
So let me ask you this. So does that mean that we align ourselves with a certain philosophy and then we are fearful to jump out with the truth that goes against that philosophy?
Yes, I think for the most part, a lot of people don't understand the distinction between truth and perception. Truth and perception. Here's the truth. And a lot of people would argue with this, but let's put it on the table. Barack Obama was born in Indonesia, okay? That's true. And according to the Constitution, the man is not qualified to hold that office. That's true, but our politicians won't talk about it because it's not politically expedient to have that kind of a conversation. The courts are not listening to that argument. They don't want to hear it because it would disrupt too many things. So it's better to to promote a lie and pretend like it doesn't exist and to ridicule those that have researched it and are trying to champion the idea than it is to just get down and tell the truth. So here we have a fundamental error going on inside our Congress, inside our courts, and inside the executive. Everybody knows that Barack Obama was born in Indonesia, and if you don't know that, you haven't been paying attention. Why is that conversation not politically correct? Now, if they're going to lie about that, how many other things are they going to lie about? So we have an entire government, we have an entire political establishment, both parties. No one wants to talk about the truth of the matter. Again, why? Because it's outside the accepted norms of conversation. So everybody wants to remain safe and sound and secure within the political norms. And as a result, we're living in a nation based upon perpetual lies. Now, this is typical of every government in the history of the world. The first casualty is always truth. And our conversations become shallow, they become politically correct, and before you know it, we're hemmed in our thoughts. And, that's a bigger deterrent toward freedom than anything, is being afraid to speak out.
Hold those thoughts, will you? We'll be right back. That's still a hard one for me to get my head wrapped around.
That he was born in Indonesia?
No, that people cannot see what's going on, that they can actually argue against about what we're talking about. And I know if I believe it, I'm right, but still, bottom line is, this is just so obvious. Where does somebody get there? Obviously, you're going to tell me they've been educated that way, and that's how they've been brought up. But I guess I give people too much faith or something. I don't know. I got behind a gal a couple years ago at a convenience store that was buying a 12-pack of pop. She had to pull out 4 credit cards before she could get one that would work. I guess that... Welcome back. It's nice to go back sometimes, isn't it? I guess that always wasn't... It wasn't the pot of gold that we thought it to be, but... it's our pot of gold. I guess what David Justice is talking about is we have a chance for our own pot of gold right here in front of us, too. We just have to recognize it and figure it out.
The Stuart Rhodes of Oath Keepers is a lawyer, and he started this organization called Oath Keepers. And I took the oath. I was a Coast Guardsman. I'm a vet. And I took an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. This idea that Americans have that it couldn't happen here, here's a good example. Before it rained in Noah's time, the flood, it had never rained before. This is a little piece of history people don't know. It had never rained before. So you had this guy, Noah, building his boat, and he's telling everybody it's about to rain. And it's going to flood. And everybody's laughing at him and ridiculing him because it's never rained before. This guy's an absolute lunatic. Of course, everybody knows the story. It's the same thing here. It's never rained in America. I'm using that as a metaphor. We've never experienced what we're about to experience in America. And so we're going through the normalcy bias. It's so difficult to get our mind around that it could happen here that we spend time in denial. And it's easier to dismiss it by ridiculing the idea than to let it in and suffer the depression that you will go through by letting it in, or the anger once you get on the other side of the depression. But this is naive. This is what I would consider naive and gullible if we all believe that suddenly an election is going to change the direction this country's going. Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Somebody said that was the definition of insanity. So the idea that we're waiting for a savior And the liberals are thinking that Obama is that savior. We're looking to the vehicle called government to bail us out of this thing, and it's not going to happen. It's never happened in history. Why are we so naive to believe that it's going to happen differently in America? And folks, we've got a war coming, and it's already started. The bullets haven't started flying yet. We're in that time, like Robert Allen was talking about, before the bullets started flying. And we better get our minds around the revolution that takes place. It actually takes place within our minds and within our hearts. And if it doesn't change there, it doesn't change. Bullets and guns are the last resort. And if we do all of the preliminary work before that, maybe we can avert it, but we shouldn't expect that it will go away. We need to be ready in case it does come down to the bullets and guns, because I know I'm not giving mine up.
David Justice, thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Drive home safely, okay? We got to run. Remember, I had a call from Jerry yesterday. He'd been calling Gail Schwartz, and her mailbox was full. Don't let that stop you. 303-866-4871, 303-866-4871. You can go to the Colorado General Assembly page, and you can get those numbers and email addresses. Make those calls, send those emails. God bless each and every one of you. We'll be back again tomorrow on the Red Barn Steakhouse, Montrose, Uray, and San Miguel Farm Bureau. Drug Testing Incorporated, Trading Post.